April 2025 meeting, the Alamance County Planning Board will come to order. Let's see. You got the roll, sir?
Yes, sir. We have two absent, but we still have a forum to conduct business.
Okay. Okay, so Stephen reached out that he wasn't gonna be here, and Mac may be late, or we'll see. Anyhow, okay. Has everybody had a chance to read over the minutes from last month?
I'll make a motion.
Second. Got a motion and a second to approve the minutes. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Good. I don't have anybody on the public comments list. Does anybody got anything you want to say?
I didn't get to sign that.
Okay,
Do I have to get you to step up over there?
yeah, just go on over. I'll sign you up.
Thank you. I'm sorry about that. I didn't really prepare anything. I was just looking at some of the changes y'all were preparing on, of course, it's the mobile home parks, taking them out of the agricultural district. I think you're limiting the affordable housing quite a bit. I don't think the county's gonna get run over with people wanting to put them down there. Of course, your lot sizes are still a little bit large. I think it's gonna, well, the people with farms, that's great. But you know, when the grandchildren want to sell these farms, I just see issues with that. With the, you know, your large lots, you're gonna cut buildability down. But, that's all I got. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Okay. Okay. Old business?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we got a couple items here under old business, the table of use review and the definitions. And then our new business, obviously, we've got the draft ordinance. I don't imagine a rigorous examination of these in order. They all kind of intertwine. So I'm happy as we go through them, I'm happy to answer questions, and I think we're probably going to naturally kind of bounce back and forth. So if that type of format is okay with you, then I'm going to kind of proceed that way. So as with regards to the table of uses, so we did have a number of comments during the last meeting from board members, and I sought to address those as best I could, or as required in the table of uses. So I'm just going to go through those one by one with the comment that was submitted and then the action that we took as a result. So one question was about Elon's expansion plans toward the town of Ossipee in their comprehensive plan. They have kind of a footprint north of their town limits. I contacted the town about that. They really don't have any priority expansion plans there. They don't see any problem with at all with us including that area on our map. Another comment about a third of the home being the limit for maximum usage for home occupations, especially when it comes to taxes. And so there's a definition now for customary home occupations, and it includes that 1/3 limit for the square footage of the residence being used for the occupation. There was questions about businesses in residences being open to the public. Would handicap parking be required? Would ADA considerations be required? Talked to the chief building inspector about that today. His interpretation is that yes, if a business is open to the public, then ideally they should have those type of ADA compliance features as part of the development. Question about making home-based business, or a comment about making a home-based business an accessory use to the principal use. That provision has been added to the definition of home-based businesses. I think it's at the definition is at the end of your agenda packet. Allowing home-based businesses in the resort, or I'm sorry, the residential and suburban transition districts. Those changes have been made. Not allowing mobile home parks in the ag district. Those have been removed from the ag district. Adding a 1/2 mile separation for family care homes. That provision was added to the definition of family care homes and as a note in the table of uses. There's also a question about needing to list agricultural uses at all since they are exempt from these regulations. I did decide to keep those uses in the table because not all agricultural operations may also meet the criteria to be exempt from the state's definition of zoning regulations, for example. So like a community garden in the Mill Village will likely not meet the minimum lot size requirements for the tax deferment, but it is still agricultural in nature. So by listing it and allowing it, we kind of clarify that. Recommendation to move clubs, lodges, and banquet halls to be given allowance and a special use label. That change was made. Not allowing the government services and administrative use in the ag districts. That change was made. Average lot size for airport facilities and possibly adding a special use permit. So I actually did a little bit of research on this and I found 5 regional airports in our area, the smallest of which their property is about 83 acres. So I compromised on that a good bit and set the minimum at 40 acres. And that's actually in line with the most intense uses in the industrial ordinance as well. We can go into that in detail if you want to. There's also a request to create a new use for food operations incidental to or food sales, food operations incidental to agricultural operations. So we created a new definition there and added that to the table in the agricultural district. A request to move the adult store and sexually oriented businesses to the recreation and entertainment category. We made that change. And then finally change the recycling drop-off station to require some type of landscaping in the ag district and allow it in the residential district. We made this change to those districts, but did not spell out the details on the landscape. And that's kind of where I wanted to finish with this whole section, is to maybe get into details on landscaping, or have that be something that you guys think about and come back later on. If we've got quite a few uses in there where we talked about some type of landscape buffers. You remember we talked about the utility, the substation facilities possibly having landscaping. So I think it's worth a discussion to think about exactly what type of landscaping we may have, if any, whether it's a recycling facility or any other type of use. But with regards to the request for the table of uses and the changes, that's my summary on that. Happy to take any questions.
Don't everybody go at once.
I have one kind of dumb question. And I don't remember. The fairgrounds temporary.
Yeah.
Permitted for up to 96 hours. What does that mean? 96 hours open?
That means
96 hours for the length of the event?
the length of the event.
Okay, does that need further? Are you gonna get somebody that says, oh, well, I'm only open 12 hours a day, so that could be 8 days?
Yeah, let me find that on the table. Yeah, I didn't do any underlining or highlighting on this one, and I probably should have. I think the way that came about is we had a fairgrounds.
Yeah, temporary.
And it was,
17 permitted up to 96 hours is all it
Right.
says.
Well, I think to begin with, we just had one use. We just had fairgrounds. There was no distinction between permanent and temporary. And I think that might have come about because the fairgrounds on the map are technically in the residential district, the rural residential district. So there was a question about, pop-up events or weekend festivals or that type of thing. So that you can accommodate it, but it wouldn't be a permanent
We
feature of that.
just have one of those in Hall River.
Okay.
So, I mean,
Don't they usually run about 8 days?
they do, they
Try to
run.
catch
10
2
or-
week, yeah,
they-
try to
they
catch 2 weekends.
weekends. Yeah.
Okay. And is that,
That's why I'm asking the 96 hours, does that mean the time that they're open, or is it?
I think the
the
thing
24
is,
hours event?
if it's like a fair that lasts for a week, it's gonna be on the fairgrounds. If it is a kind of a special event, seasonal event that may only be there for a weekend, that's what the temporary use can accommodate. I'm hoping to change it. I'm not digging my heels in on that. I'm just kind of explaining to you the rationale.
And I guess what I'm saying, I'm not asking you to change it, I'm saying, is that an adequate explanation of what 96
Is
hours?
that
But they try
90,
to go about 10 days.
is that 96 hours of open time? I think
That's what I'm saying.
that's what
Or
she's
is
saying.
that, you know,
Is that
it
96
starts
hours?
Monday, it ends Friday.
That's more like it starts Friday, it ends Sunday, and then you have time on Monday for cleanup.
And I
I'm not an
and
expert, I'm not an expert in, fair operations.
But
so
could somebody
if
make
we-
an argument that that's 96 hours, it's not open. It's only
the
open
pop-up
from 5 to
carnivals
12, so.
there's a pop-up carnivals fall under the temporary fair.
I would assume so, and it's also gonna be dependent upon the district that it's in.
So where would be the right place to add a clarification on that topic if we wanted to?
Is that a definition kind of thing?
We could definitely do a definition.
Cause those pop-up carnivals try to catch like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then all the next weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
So
They try
all
to
the things
catch-
that are permitted with additional regulations,
the additional regulation is the time parameter.
I think we probably need to point to an additional regulation to be added to this ordinance, or if it's housed somewhere else. As we have in some of these other sections.
I mean, most of those things
Is
are
there-
not in the county, they're in,
Yeah, most of them's in the city.
in some city or town.
Is there an existing time ordinance that can be permitted for fires right now?
Not to my knowledge.
Like, don't the sheriff issue that permit?
I honestly don't know. I think it's been at least 10 years since we had it.
Yeah, I
Fair,
mean,
yeah.
since the here went out, there hadn't been. That's the county fair ain't been since.
I mean, I think the one that the Chucky and I are talking about, the state has to inspect them, right?
Yes.
Yeah, DOL has to inspect the
Yes.
ones like we're talking about.
And I don't know that any local jurisdiction does. You know,
I don't know either. Like I said, in the rural county, those are to call something a county fair is franchise, and we used to have one of those for a long time, and people still own that franchise, for lack of a better word, but we haven't done any in so long. I don't really know how we process those.
So we need a definition on a temporary fairground. And do you think we need to alter those hours?
just.
Well, be not,
plain
if one of those pop-up carnivals decide to go out in the county somewhere, it wouldn't need more than 96 hours from me, because I'm saying it's gonna try to get about 10 days.
If the 96 hours is
Yeah,
per
if it's
day,
just open hours,
Yeah, well, that would cover it,
but.
but they would cover it if it was just open hours.
It would be close, because they would probably.
10
try to be
days, if
open
you
100
go the whole
hours.
10 days, that'd be 240 days. I mean, 240 hours, right?
This also is probably not a stupid question, but what is a permanent fairground? What would be an example of a permanent
Well,
fairground?
we have that, right?
Do we still own the permanent fairgrounds, or does Ivy Farm Supply own it?
I mean, I know they used to.
They've
but
always owned.
Oh, okay,
is
they've
that-
always
is that-
owned it.
Yeah,
is it
they've always
permanent?
owned
It's like
that. Ain't
put
been
their
since
property
I was
out
a boy,
there.
got free tickets.
That's the property with the fair.
We used to have we used to own a county
Okay.
over where the Alamance County Hospital's at. That's where the county fairgrounds used to be. And then when that was done away with, the Isleys started up the fair out there.
So it's a piece of property that's there for the use of a fair in the event that they have one. It's just, is that basically what it is?
Basically, yeah.
Okay.
Well, okay, so years ago, didn't the county have some functions at the fairgrounds in the course of the year other than the fair?
Mhm.
Didn't they have a car show at the fairground?
yes,
Didn't they have a tractor pull
Concert,
at the fairground?
yes.
Didn't they have a concert or
Yes.
whatever at the fairgrounds?
yes, but,
Okay,
and the distinction would be permanent buildings that are there that are
Used for.
used for and inspected for that purpose, correct? Correct.
that'd be my thought.
Sounds right to me.
Did the county own that property over here on Graham Hookdale Road? Wasn't it on Graham Hookdale
No.
Road?
It was,
No,
it was
it's
over
over here,
ARC,
ARMC over here,
out Huffman
over here,
Hill.
Huffman Mill.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, when y'all said Old County Hospital, that threw me way out left field. I don't
No, I
remember, the
said-
county hospital, the county hospital.
I didn't put the old, I said
Okay.
the county
Oh,
hospital.
okay.
It was a landfill on top of all of that.
I don't
But
think-
it
I don't think the
wasn't
county
owned
owned that
by the county.
We did own it at one time.
property, so.
Hmm
Go back far enough.
we sure did.
He's the only one who remembers that. So we never had a
There's some
fairground.
older folks in here.
We never had a fairground on Graham Hookdale Road.
Not to my knowledge. So
There used to be a county fair.
He said county hospital, that's what's got you thinking about Graham Hookdale Road, me
Did
too.
they never have something on the old airport over there?
Well, that's what I was thinking.
no, it was always, they only, they had a,
Maybe it wasn't a fair.
they had a temporary thing over there one
Maybe it was
time.
one of them.
It was one of them,
Was like.
one of them carnival
Just
things,
in
one of
96
them carnival things came in there, but
Okay.
there never was a county fair or anything.
Okay.
And then they had it open.
I will
We've gone off on a tangent,
craft the
sorry.
definition for fairgrounds, permanent and temporary, and I'll take a look. If there is some kind of a state regulation, that might help inform us on if we need to set some type of hourly parameter. My thought was, so my thinking going into this was, you have the property where the fair happened or happens. But then you may have a little pop-up event, you know, in Saxball on the weekend or whatever. So you want to give them, and that's why I did 96 hours and not 72. They're setting up and starting on a Friday, going all day Saturday, going all day Sunday, then they got some time to kind of tear it down on a Monday. That was my thinking. If these events are typically longer, we can certainly extend it.
That type of event you're thinking of would not be an event with rides.
Right.
It would be more of an informal, I mean, there's nobody that would, I would think it would be cost prohibitive
Mhm.
and time prohibitive. It takes a day or two to get inspections off on the rides.
Cause I think all them inspections have to be done by the state,
You know,
and that's a day of the 2-day process.
which I'm not saying, I'm just noting that there might be opportunity for interpretation
Mhm.
in the way that is written.
Absolutely, yeah.
So,
Well, there's a lot of opportunity for interpretation in this. That's for sure.
Well, the logic that you've explained makes perfect sense.
mhm.
So,
And the conversation that has occurred as a result of that also makes perfect sense. So having, in my opinion, some latitude in there based on what the specific need is the way to go. You gotta have a template to start place.
we could just not even call it fairgrounds. We could call it special event properties or temporary special events. I don't know.
You could get into, that could get into something different because, at some point, you may have a special event come, park come in here, like a Great Wolf or something, you know, I'm just used to that, you know, where that could actually come into the county or something, and that would be a permanent event.
Right.
So
it
we
would
fall
be
down
subject
under
to the
recreation
permit
and
rules
entertainment
of temporary.
facility, right?
Yeah, that would be more of along the lines of a permanent development. Yeah,
That's what I'm
not
saying, you
something
know.
That's inherently temporary in nature, you know, a long weekend or a holiday festival or something like that. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions on the revisions of the table? We'll get through it. I mean, obviously, it's about halfway through the ordinance, so we'll go back through it, but. Are you laughing at me?
I'm just laughing. I'm just wondering if sexually oriented businesses are recreation
Uh,
or entertainment.
Good question.
I guess it's all about perspective.
That's right. Well, it's recreation and entertainment category, so
Entertaining recreation.
again, it's up to, it's subjective.
It covers on both
It's
sides.
up to interpretation.
Is that the way it works?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yes, for more specific definition in our glossary here on that.
I think we already have.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, we have definitions for that, but not subdivision
Okay,
in
wow.
the ordinance. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not yet. All right, speaking of definitions, So a lot of this I've already touched on, but, we're moving down the agenda there. So added a new definition for agricultural food operations. That was one of our requests at the last meeting. Added a half-mile spacing in for the family care homes. Clarified that a home-based business must be an accessory use to the primary residence. And added a new definition for customary home occupations, which is more designed to accommodate businesses within residences. So the distinction here would be home-based business is you've got a 3-bed, 2-bath brick ranch up front, and you've got a garage in the back where somebody's doing auto repair. Customary home occupation is you got a 3-bed, 2-bath brick ranch, and a portion of that house is dedicated to accounting services or a hair salon or nail salon, something like that. So home-based business is in a structure on the property. Customary home occupation is within the house. Those are the primary differentiating points in those definitions. Any questions on the definitions? More to come, I'm sure.
I'd like to ask, the last sentence, in certain cases, like when it increases commercial traffic. Is it home occupation subject to things, technicals needs to be processed, what would that look like? Would there be a
Let's show you what you.
threshold? No,
So, okay. Now, make sure I'm reading the same section you are. This is customary home occupations?
yes.
Okay, yeah. So, okay, so, a moment ago, I made the difference between like an accounting firm and like a hair salon. So the accounting firm is probably gonna have all online clients, right? They may never really have anybody to show up to the house. In that case, you may not need, even though it is a business that's commercial in nature, you may not need an NCDOT driveway permit, you may not need an ADA ramp. All the business is conducted online. Whereas if it is a hair salon, nail salon, a business in which there's an increase in traffic to the home, and they either apply or we are notified or they're kind of in the process, then in that case, we would require them to go through the TRC review process. Similar to as if they were a brand new brick and mortar business that we're establishing, not inside of the home.
I was just gonna say, it's common with home occupation regulations is you just set a limit, like the business can't generate more than 5 business vehicle trips in a day. And that way you can have something to go off of. If a neighbor
Yeah.
complains about it, you could go out there, you could stake it out and see how many customers are you gonna have in a day?
Yeah.
This just seems like this, like, so the TRC is gonna review a site plan.
I think that's a good point.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think,
Yeah.
what's the TRC gonna do? Who's on the TRC here? I know.
Sure, yeah. So that's us, environmental health, building inspections,
DOT.
GIS addressing, NCDOT, fire marshal.
So you could have DOT is there to say, we don't think this is an issue.
Right.
This business would generate that kind of.
Exactly. So yeah, I'm certainly open to your metric. I think that's a good idea.
It's just very common for home occupations. There's like a list of, and some of them are kind of vague, like it can't emit, it can't interfere with, radios, TVs and things like that. You can set standards like you can't have so many vehicle trips per day.
Yeah.
The idea is you don't have a full-fledged business with ongoing traffic throughout the day.
Right. Thoughts?
And I could send you something. I mean, just how it's.
How do you ever enforce that?
Enforce which one?
How many business trips on a day?
That's a really good question. I mean, I got a little nervous when they said, stake out the property.
I heard stake out.
A complaint basis.
Yeah.
I've had to deal with this in my career.
So like a neighbor sitting there looking out the window and say, I saw 18 cars pull in on Tuesday and 7 pulling on
And
Wednesday.
they'll tell you to.
And then the homeowner,
You know-
homeowner may say, that's not that, but part of this was my family, someone, then it gets to sort of,
Yeah.
what does it
Yeah,
actually
correct.
mean?
It gets difficult, but
Right.
at least you've given them a threshold and they know what that is. It's not, I don't know. The idea is that when I get my permit, I should know. Am I within, what's within my legal limit to do? If you don't have that, then anyone can say, well, you have too many vehicle trips. Well, it says here I can have so many, I can show that, they could keep a ledger. This was my appointment book for that day. Let's say a hairdresser. My mom was a hairdresser operator from time when she kept an appointment book. Get asked to see that. Can you show me proof of that? The neighbor can prove that all of these were business trips. It's difficult,
Yeah,
but at least you have a standard to go by.
And what if anything on here does, limits the amount of environmental, impact? Like, I come to thinking, and my thinking is, a paint booth, in a residential area, in a garage. It's emitting toxic, what is the basis of looking at the environmental effect that you're gonna have on businesses in that area, in a residential area? There's nothing in here that states anything that limits that kind of operation.
Yeah, and we've dealt with that. Well, we got one call and complaint about that, but it ended up being in Burlington's ETJ. And that is a reality. I think we run the risk of that a little bit. Well, we run the risk as it is. We may run the risk of that continuing with, the home-based businesses. Typically with a paint booth, right, it's a commercial operation. People are coming to the property or delivering cars to the property to be painted or have the exterior touched up or whatever. That would either on the front end through the application process, go through TRC, or if we get some type of complaint, go through TRC. And I don't know that inspections would allow them to have an outdoor, any type of even semi-outdoor paint booth. I think something like that has got to be enclosed per.
Yeah, but it's gonna be enclosed, but your exhaust is gonna be going outside.
Yeah.
It's all exhausted. Now there's different levels of filters and stuff that, especially inside, the city limits, and it's not only just paint booths, there's other industries that you could get into that, you could, run into some environmental impacts on too. Like, if you have an air conditioning, company, they ain't supposed to, but if they release Freon into the atmosphere, it's just, I don't know that if that's something that needs to be.
So I don't think those
You know,
items are things that the county would regulate even in an industrial area, right? I mean, those are air quality impacts are regulated by the state.
but we're talking about if, a home business, you don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I just think there's a regulation protocol for that. It's just not county based. So I would be hesitant to get into it. If it's air quality, that's gonna be regulated by the state. And if it's, something that's noxious to the neighbors, then that's a private lawsuit. It's just even in the best of circumstances, the county would not have an air quality regulation. So, I do understand it's extra sensitive in a residential area.
Mhm.
I just wouldn't want to make a rule on that, and we don't have the capacity to enforce on that side.
Well, how would you handle a complaint from a residence that, Henry's painting cars over here and he's putting fumes out in there?
Send it to the state EPA.
DEQ, yeah.
Oh.
I think the same way you do it regardless of what zone it's in.
Okay, I'm just asking.
It's
because I
not
don't-
To the state because it's air quality.
Yeah.
Right now, they ain't nothing.
Go to states.
Yeah, well, on residential, they don't have no, yeah. Okay, that's all.
Any other questions on the definitions?
Sure would be nice with this home-based business where they're gonna be working in vehicles that they don't have the ability to park 500 cars in there.
Yeah, and I think that if you look at the additional regulations, and I was actually just looking for that now.
Okay,
Um. So right above there, you got the automobile graveyard, junkyard. That is specifically designed to basically say if you have 3 or more quote unquote junk vehicles on your property, they've got to be behind the structure, they've got to be under a car cover, they may have to be in a fence. So there's a separate ordinance that regulates that type of activity. But that's fairly common too. We'll have somebody come through TRC and they want to do auto repair, they want to do tire service, whatever. And we'll ask them, do you plan to have junk vehicles out there? And if you do, this additional ordinance is gonna take effect. You're gonna have concealed car
Fence
cover,
and
fence around the
something.
perimeter, so that's not changing at all. That's still gonna be in effect. The ordinance.
Y'all ready? Sure. Okay, here we go.
All right, I'm gonna go through this similar to how we've done with our draft revisions to the UDO in the past several months, just kind of go section by section. And then obviously at the end, if you guys have questions or want to dig into the details, we certainly can. But similar to the map earlier, and then the table of uses and the definitions, I think it's perfectly fine. I'll take this home, chew on it, formulate some additional questions and suggestions, and we can come back in and dig into more details at the next meeting. All right, so just beginning at the top, so we have an index there, same format as all of the other ordinances. Section 5.1 establishes the local government authority and sets out the purpose and the goals of the ordinance. 5.2 simply establishes the jurisdiction to which the regulations would apply. Section 5.3 explains how and why bona fide farm operations would be exempt from the ordinance. 5.4 establishes the various land use districts, and obviously we've covered those in recent meetings, especially with the map. The lot size regulations corresponding to those districts, and the permitting process for approval. Section 5.5 does the most work in the ordinance. That details exactly what the mill village districts are and the form of developments which will be allowed in those districts. In particular, section 5.5.2 features photos of existing structures within the county so that future developers would know what type of design elements would be desired. Section 5.5.3 establishes a permitting review process very similar to the previous section, 5.4. The biggest change here would be that this section also establishes that this planning board would sit as the Alamance County Appearance Commission. You would then evaluate the characteristics of proposed developments within the Middle Village district and make either a recommendation for approval or denial of a project prior to the construction of that project. 5.6 establishes the table of uses, which we've covered now for the last couple of meetings. And yeah, changes to the table are covered in the old business. And then 5.7, so this is incorrectly labeled, it should be 5.7 there at the end. Establishes the district map, which obviously we covered. As well as where that map would be housed, how and when it would be interpreted, and how and when it would be amended. And in broad summary, that is the ordinance that you have to. Happy to take any questions.
Can you add a little more depth to the lot size dimensions and area configurations or major, minor, that type of thing, just to provide a little clarity, at least to me anyway,
Sure,
what
yeah.
these look like.
All right, so
What page you on?
This is page 5.
page 5 of the draft ordinance. So probably the two big figures to look at there are in the agricultural districts, major subdivisions would feature a 5 acre minimum lot size by default. Those are major subdivisions. That's 15 or more lots. Okay. Minor subdivision, which would be 14 or fewer, the minimum lot size would be 2 acres. Part of the reason that I have this kind of, compromise in there, if you might say, if you guys remember when we talked about previous changes to the subdivision ordinance, we wanted to have some flexibility for families. Grandma and grandpa have a 20, 30, 40 acre farm. They want to carve out a few lots for family. They're not doing a major 15+ lot subdivision with cul-de-sac roads and all the rest. They're really just carving out a few lots. So the ordinance already makes that distinction between a minor and a major subdivision. The key number is 15. So I just use the existing regulations to then also differentiate the lot that would be allowed there by right. By right means you can draw the plan, you can submit it to the office. If it meets the ordinance, we approve it. They would then have the option, as you go through the list here, cluster subdivisions that could have a lot as small as 8,000 square feet, but they would have to preserve a certain percentage of open space.
What is that percentage? Has that been
I think,
determined?
yeah, it'll be part of the draft of the subdivision ordinance, but I
Okay.
think when we looked at it last time, it was either 25 or 30%, if I remember correctly. Then we would have a density subdivision. If you remember last time, we talked about how specific conditions for a property might make it so that it makes sense for a property to be a lot to be as small as 30,000 square feet, right? So you might have a situation where you have a 30,000 square foot lot next to an acre, next to an acre and a half, next to 5, next to 10. As long as the average of the overall development was 5 acres. That's what that density subdivision is. At the very end of the last meeting, we talked.
I wasn't here. Could you repeat that one more time? I missed the last meeting. I was out of town. Could you
Sure,
repeat that
yeah.
one more time, please? Thank
So
you.
the idea is recognizing the realities of the situation, topography, soil types, all the rest. To have a 5 acre across the board minimum lot size doesn't always make sense in all conditions. But the goal is on aggregate to have a 5 acre minimum. So this would be a compromise and flexibility to say that the proposed subdivision might have a very small, half acre, 3,000 square foot lot, 30,000, I'm sorry. Next to 1 acre, next to 2 acres, so on and so forth. But the overall lot size average for that new subdivision would have to be 5 acres.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
it does now. Thank you. Yes.
And then non-residential uses, 2 acres. And we could talk about that more. I want to say at some point we touched on that as a possibility, non-residential not needing as much space as residential. And again, this would only be an agricultural district, the green areas on the map that we looked at.
Matthew, help me understand on this, this residential cluster subdivision, 8,000 square feet, why it would even be listed under agricultural district?
That's a permitted use in the agricultural district, right?
Well, I'm just asking a question.
If I remember correctly, I know we had talked about that at the last meeting, but I don't.
I questioned the cluster subdivision at the last meeting.
Yeah. I don't know that we made a decision to not allow them in the agricultural district.
Well, I asked for it to be, but it maybe decided not to, but I asked for it not to be allowed in the agriculture district.
Okay. Is there,
I'm just opening it up for discussion.
Yeah.
I did,
I
I
mean,
don't think it belongs.
yeah, if that's the desire of the board, we can certainly amend that for sure.
I'm not
I gotta
against
throw
it,
it out there.
but I'm 8,000 square feet. Just don't know how one would get down to that.
That's
What would that
the,
look
that's
like?
the current minimum in the ordinance.
That would have to
Without
be,
water and
For
sewer.
public.
that would,
Well,
they,
you got
they
to
would
have
have,
some
have
type
to
of
have
water and some type of sewer for that.
yeah, you have to have a community, you have to have a community source system and the community water in order to come to the to do the cluster.
The 8,000 square feet.
Yeah,
Haven't seen that.
And it's- I just- I wanna ask, oh,
We've had a couple, right, Ian, that have come in with lots down around 8,000 square feet, but they had
Those are public water use.
public water and then offsite septic systems.
Public water?
Yeah.
What city?
Yeah.
Okay,
Just south of Nevin.
I didn't realize that the water lines going out in the county.
How far the water lines go
Well,
out?
you can have a well that is public water,
There's not a ton.
Right, you could have. a
not
community well.
necessarily
No, I
a city
know about
water.
that, but I've just never seen them go drop down to that low.
How far does the water lines go out in the southern part of the county? Do you know?
That's a really good question. We've tried on a few occasions to get a good footprint map of operation. It's not much because they figure out ways to annex those properties whenever
Right.
they extend those utility lines.
Not past Websonville as far as the southeast part,
Okay,
and not
and like the
past
southern Alamance part,
Village Alamance,
okay,
stop at Alamance.
okay. Like Alamance Creek area, I guess, basically somewhere, I don't know if that's the boundary or not, but
And it's pretty far up north.
is it?
Oh, yeah.
In your direction.
Yeah, they come straight to us.
That's good.
It stops at the creek, Reedy Fork Creek, on Old
Green
87.
levels, it's up pretty far north, Green Level, which is
Yeah, then Green Level going out that way.
Burlington.
Well, Burlington is everybody.
Do we have situations where the area that is allowed for the 8,000 square feet cluster subdivision that is in the agriculture district?
I'm sorry, repeat the question.
Do we have an 8,000 square foot?
Oh, currently.
Currently, yes. And I don't expect you to answer the top of your head. I'm just asking the board. I don't know that where it exists. If city water and sewer extends out, it almost kills the ag district at that point.
Yeah. The presumption would be, it would largely be community systems. And I think we have 2 or 3 community systems in the county. One thing we talked about too, and I think maybe we just need to dig into the details on this, is the design and kind of the arrangement of the cluster subdivision is gonna make a big difference. So for example, one example you brought to these meetings is like on 62 north of Burlington, for example. You're driving through there, you just got mailbox, and so that, not only is that jarring from kind of a development and a landscape standpoint, but it also provides a lot of potential points of conflict for vehicular traffic through there.
Oh, yeah.
So if instead you had relatively small lots that were off of the main road down a neighborhood road, and then the preserved open space of the clustered subdivision is all up against the state highway there, where you just see trees, or you may see a park, or you might see natural features, then the overall kind of impact and design and everything really blends into the environment. You've created density, you've allowed for a lot of housing and created density, but the overall design really blends in with the rural environment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, what you said makes sense, but I don't see how you would accomplish that in a rural environment. I'm thinking 8,000 square feet is really, really small.
Well, that's just the minimum. They could do 12,000, right, 15,000.
Still is very small.
Yeah.
For agriculture district.
oh,
So you mentioned this, but I want to be sure I understand completely. The event that somebody, grandma, grandpa, mom, and dad wants to give sibling a piece of property, carved off out of their own. Was that, is it the 2 acre size, or was that something, or was that, could be any size? What does that process look like? I know you went over it, but I want to be sure I understand what.
So yeah, the minimum or the minor subdivision.
Yes,
so
sir.
14 or fewer lots.
Yeah, so even in the situation where somebody was going to carve a piece of property out for a family member, it still would be at that 2 acre
Correct.
size.
Yeah.
Okay,
Correct. Now, that's the draft as I have it. If
Right.
y'all want to go to an across the board 5 acres in that agricultural district, we can have that conversation.
I actually think that's still too much. I'm probably on the opposite side of the deal. I think the 2 acres is too much.
Okay.
And I think, and I've
Too
been
restricted.
too restrictive. I think the 5 acres also is too much, is too restrictive. That's just my opinion on what we're looking at here. And I understand that the thought about the cluster subdivisions, but me personally, I don't have an issue with that. But my bigger issue is that I feel like the lot size minimums are too large.
So,
Go ahead.
in the discussion on the cluster subdivision, is it possible, I guess it is possible, you can do whatever you want to do, right? The 8,000 square foot minimum would possibly be different in different areas.
Oh, certainly, yeah.
Yeah, so that in the agricultural, maybe it's 10, 12 or something, whereas in the traditional, the transitional would be smaller.
Sure. You're talking about setting a minimum cluster subdivision size for like the ag district would be
Whatever, yeah, I mean,
half an acre. 30,000 square feet an acre, something like that.
something, and I understand what you're saying, 5 acres.
It is a lot.
Okay, so,
And
yeah, go ahead.
I just want to get some, I wanted to go back to what Lee was talking about. I want to get some, make sure I'm understanding on this residential density subdivision, it's 5 acre average. So that means if you got 10 houses, it's basically got to be on 50 acres land. Now, each one can be different. It can be a acre here or 6 acres over there, 7, but the average, so you can only have 10 houses on 50 acres of land.
In the agricultural,
Yeah, in the agricultural,
Correct.
that's, well, that's
If they choose that option.
So I think.
right.
The cluster subdivision in any area, but in an agricultural area in particular, is a way to kind of mitigate that feeling like that's too restrictive. Right, so if you wanted to allow a cluster there, then you could say, great, you could have 8,000 square feet or however many square feet, 30,000 square feet, probably more likely. And in addition to the amount that you would be entitled to, 1 per 5 acres, you could allow a bonus, 10%, 20%, whatever, to allow more houses than 1 per 5 acres if you did a cluster subdivision. We want cluster subdivisions because they allow people to live there without bringing all the bad parts of residential, development in agricultural area without, all the visual clutter, without it stopping to look like an agricultural area. I mean, that's why we want them to be clustered, because it still feels agricultural, still keeps the open area viable for agriculture while still allowing people to live there. So the clusters in the ag are compromised to what is agreed, a fairly restrictive 5 acres per lot.
Not every piece of property is going to tailor itself to fitting I don't believe anyway, a cluster subdivision. And so with that being said, having the major subdivision lot sizes at 5 acres, I just feel like it's too restrictive, because it's just it's not a puzzle where all the pieces fit together nicely sometimes. There's other variables there, and I just feel like that variable is setting the bar too high, especially for somebody who's you look at the property rights side of it. Somebody has a piece of property that's theirs. They're wanting to, maybe it was a farm, whatever it may have been, but it's circumstances that dictated to where now it needs to be changed, and they should be able to change that for the betterment of their family. And this seems to me that it's adding too many barriers there to them doing that. I believe there should be some plan, but I think that that there should be some balance to that plan too, that allows the property owners to be able to have better options. 5 acres is not a great option. Cluster subdivision may not be a great option for some properties.
well,
So. Yes, ma'am. Sure.
no, I'm just saying. The definition of a major subdivision again,
It's 15 or more lots.
15 or more lots. So you're talking a sizable piece of
Yes,
land.
ma'am.
So if you're like a 20 acre lot, it's gonna be a minor, which is 2 acres. That make,
Right. I understand what you're saying. I just still feel like that 5 acres is putting too much undue burden on the property owner. To be able to fit something in that maybe a better situation for their family. I hope people do buy property and put farms on it, or they continue to generationally keep a farm in place. I think those things are wonderful. And if somebody wants to buy a piece of property and they want to use it in a way that offers preservation around it, I think that's great. All those things are important, but I also think it's important too to be sure that there's a balance that's found for the folks that may need to or want to sell their property for whatever reason may be. And I just think that what we're looking at here is adding too much burden on that process.
So backing up in this, going back to the homestead perspective. If there's a family member who wants or needs to put a house on family land and the health department signs off on it, I think they ought to be allowed to put that on that 30,000 feet. I don't think you ought to have to cut 2 or 5 acres out of the farm for a house for son or daughter or grandchild. Now, that's just my opinion.
So I don't know that legally we can say we're gonna have one set of rules for family members because they are related. And then we're gonna have a separate set of rules for a developer from Charlotte, just because we don't like, because we don't like the developer from Charlotte coming up here and building a bunch of lots.
And I'm not gonna sit here and say, I want this to read this way. I'm just sharing with you. Cause I've kind of had in the back of my mind that if it was a family member on family land, and I don't mean somebody come in here and bought a farm and said, well, I'm gonna put my daughter over here and I'm gonna put my granddaughter over here and I'm gonna subdivide it, go through the whole family like that. That's not what I'm talking about. But
ain't there, and y'all can help me. I mean, I think I read this in here somewhere. But there's an option in here that you can bring this in for reduction on the size of a lot. If I want to cut off an acre of land or 3/4 of an acre of land, I can bring this before. I'm not sure who that identity is, but when I was reading it, would I bring it before this planning board or would I bring it before the commissioners? It's to ask for a variance for me to make that 3/4 or an acre lot.
Yeah, it would be a variance, it'd be a special use permit.
Yeah, okay,
So
it's in here somewhere. I read it.
that was a draft of the subdivision ordinance, and we can go back to that. That's not here. One thing we talked about in the last meeting was the density option. To me, the density option kind of gets you there without having to go through the special use permit process. Because the special use permit process is by its very nature detailed. You guys have to sit as a quasi judicial body, you have to hear evidence, you have to do kind of a strict interpretation kind of a thing. It can get pretty technical.
Well, I like the idea of having them.
I guess you might say an easier way to get at the same goal is this density option. Where the average is just 5 acres.
Yeah, but it has to be in a big subdivision
One thing we could do in addition to that too is say your density subdivision might have to have 10% reserved open space. Your cluster subdivision would have, 25, 30% open space. We could toy with that feature as well.
Another option here that I feel like a major subdivision at 15 lots. It's too many for what we're trying to do here. Because if I'm a developer, I'm gonna just do a 14-acre subdivision and then go by the next parcel and do a 14-acre subdivision. It's just too many. And no farmer is splitting up his property for his grandkids into 13 lots, right? It's 3 or 4. So you could drop that number of what a minor subdivision is, 5.
Yeah.
And set that at a lot number that's reasonable, 30,000, whatever you wanted to do, but anything over 5 is a major subdivision and has to do it.
And I don't know if things have changed since I cut my daughter off a piece of property. But when I cut off the piece of property for my daughter, the lending institution would not lend her no money on the house unless it was at least 2 acres. They would not, they wouldn't lend it.
I mean, I would think that's per the bank, but
That's what I'm talking about, the bank. I'm talking about the bank they told.
Well, I know for a
I
fact
know
that's not
for
a
a fact
right
that we just
statement,
finished
like
one
you
that-
said it,
it was about a
because
lot than that, so that's
the-
a per bank basis.
county's got
That's a per bank
houses.
base.
Yeah, some banks might have that.
Okay, well, I mean, that's what it was on my daughter, because I had to go back and I had to add another half an acre. to the lot that we'd already cut off.
Want to
Yeah, I mean, I'm just, but I like the option of having it in there where you can have a special permit.
I'm wondering if we wouldn't be better off to just take the cluster option out of the agricultural district. Just allow it in all of those
I
other,
agree with that.
you know, where we've already got the development and density. And just take it out of agriculture. Cause it's the agriculture that we're trying to preserve.
Right, so if you do that, and I could be wrong with this, analysis, let's say we do that, we don't have any clusters in the ag district. So you no longer would have a tool to say, we're gonna have that kind of open space buffer between the rural areas and the development and that cluster of houses. You're just gonna have yard, home, kind of a lot of the sprawl, you might call it, that you see today. One thing too, that I thought about a lot in this process is, if you are able to condense, let's say you have a 50-acre parcel, and you're able to kind of create a cluster and condense all of the new development activity down on 15 acres, right? With quite a few houses and open space and whatever, you still have that 35 you could farm, right? Out of the 50. If you had just the traditional 5 acres per house, you got 10 houses and you're done. You're not farming.
Well, this is true. Okay, so-
That's really the point, is it keeps the majority of the property still viable for agriculture.
So I'm gonna ask the question that I think everybody else here is thinking. We take 50 acres. We put 10 houses on 15 of them, and we've got 35 acres left that we're farming. We're cutting hay off of it. And a period of time lapses. And the decision is made to put some more houses on that balance of 35 acres. So we go in there and we put 10 more houses on 15 acres. Now we got 30 houses on 20 acres
30 acres.
38.
15,
and we're,
15,
and
and then 20 acres left over.
Yeah.
I'm following you.
so at what point are we gonna have 30 houses on 45 acres of land?
Yeah.
And only 5 acres left over?
So when you have an open space that is protected by the ordinance, you have to protect that. It could be given to a land conservancy or county. It's much more likely to be given to a homeowners association. That is now open space for the community.
Yep.
It even could go into farm use preservation, right?
Yeah, theoretically it could, sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And that way it can never be developed.
Rent that land to the farmer next door, but it would.
Never, not a word you can use here.
well,
It can be developed
well, it
if the
should.
right
it's some-
person-
Yeah,
with the right lawyer and the right amount of money. Want to develop it. Can be done.
Well, it don't matter what we do, right person with the right amount of money, gonna do what they want to do, it don't matter what we.
but
Cause the one thing that we do know here is the answer, no, cannot be used. You can do it, you're gonna have to do all this, you're gonna have to go jump through these hoops, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, it can be done, just like the septic system. Now,
well,
when you start spending $100,000 to put a septic system on a half-acre lot, that would be cost prohibitive for a lot of people. That takes affordable out of the equation, but it can be done. And thusly, you can develop that half-acre lot that was otherwise undevelopable, and now it's sellable for some price to somebody. So,
well, I ain't gonna tell you that it can't be done, but I'm telling you that, and you can help me with this.
Don't
But
pull me into this.
I'm gonna pull you in this, but if it goes in to farm, if it goes into farm in the agricultural protection plan,
mhm.
then it's supposed to never, and I'm using the word never, be able to be taken out of that. It can be sold in any way you want to farm it, you know, that's fine, but it cannot be taken out once it's put in there.
But what you said was supposed to. Now, what I'm saying, isn't it legally correct? With enough money and enough court proceedings, you
Well,
can take it back out.
according to
You
whatever,
go back and pay all of the
Not
taxes.
legally correct, but it's practically correct.
but according to what's being presented in farm preservation, the law protects that land from not being taken out with even a bunch of money, because the development rights on that piece of property have been sold to whatever identity, the county or the state, whichever one holds that. But
And when the person comes along, is willing to pay that money back, buy them rights back.
but you can't pay it back. I'm telling you, the way it's written by
Okay.
state law.
Okay.
Am I wrong?
There's gonna be a special case for everything. If we see it, the state legislator every.
Well, it's-
I
we
wouldn't worry that much
we went
about
after this for
happening,
so
but-
Yeah,
many
it
years.
ain't gonna have
You
I
know.
understand that.
It ain't gonna have the marvelous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Likely won't happen in mine your lifetime.
I thought he gonna have Mike,
So-
he gonna be that long.
The cluster by the cluster by the cluster.
Yeah. The Russian nesting dollar clusters.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is there a way in the landscape ordinance or whatever that you mentioned earlier to require a larger buffer between cluster subdivisions, which would then discourage what we were speaking of?
I'm sure there's a way, yeah. To me, is that optimal? I don't know that that would be as optimal as, for example, saying that maybe if you do have two clusters right next to each other, that the open space needed to connect. So that way you would basically have two neighborhoods side by side with like a shared park kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which I think would be a pretty nice feature.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can dial in those regulations kind of however you want.
On another note, what is the goal of all this discussion this evening with this ordinance?
So the goal here is to answer whatever questions you might have that are really popping out and need to be addressed tonight.
Okay,
Second goal is take it home, cut it to pieces, chew over it, you know, make some highlights, make some notes, come back at the next meeting with some more questions.
still on 5 acres.
Chew on it. I think we probably do need to talk about if we're gonna have that minimum lot size in the areas that we are and whether or not we're gonna have clusters in the ag district. That seems to be two pretty big topics tonight.
So just for my clarification, so the 5 acre minimum is to preserve agriculture,
I think the 5 acre minimum is
rural
to
character.
rural character and to ensure a low density development pattern in the rural areas.
I think all the above.
I think the problem is from everything I've read and somewhat seen, 5 acres isn't gonna do it anyway. It's gonna wind up creating more land than probably the average person's really, you can't farm it. I mean, if you have a 5 acre lot, can you really farm that?
You
might
work
have a-
yourself to death gardening, but you're not
you might
gonna make
have
a
a
living
very
farming.
So,
Yeah.
But, you know, so you're gonna,
Depends on
you're
what you're
essentially, you're
doing.
gonna wind up creating a
Raise
market for
marijuana.
5 acre lots. This has already happened.
I don't raise a whole lot of
With
chickens
our
on
neighbors
5
to the
acres.
east, they did something like this around
Now.
Capitol and Carborough in the late 80s, where they created a minimum 2 acre minimum lot size. And all that did was make a.
I don't
market
think
for
they
2
want
acre
a chicken house
lots.
in the side,
You got
inside that
5
5 acre area.
Buy 2 acre lot. You got money, you'll buy a 5 acre lot, but you wind up having the average person 2 acres. I don't want to take care of 2 acres. 53.
And I think that's why we want the clusters in the agricultural area.
Yeah.
To accommodate the people who,
And that's where you do get some benefit there. You can have maybe not 8,000 square feet, but you have a smaller lot, maybe tucked back in the tree line and not up in your face. Like, you know, you see driving down some of the rural roads in the county now, where the developers come in, it's just driveway, and the houses
And then you
like
got
they're
the guy across. the street.
right up next to
Hang on,
the
man.
curb.
And you're left with a farmable piece of property, 30, 50 acres, whatever, that is farmable. As opposed to 5 acre lots, which you're right, are ultimately not.
Yeah.
They're mowable, they're not particularly farmable.
Yeah, most play, 5 acres, if agricultural preservation, 5 acres will do it.
One thing that might be important to note too is we currently have a provision for cluster subdivisions in the county and no required open space. So a developer could technically just go in and chop them up into really small lots.
Has that been accessed very often? That,
We've had, in the year and a half I've been here, we've definitely had the one and maybe a two
Which one?
cluster subdivisions landing at Summer Haven.
I want to call that cluster. Landing at Summer haven't had public water.
Right.
Yeah, so they got 8,000 because of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's things I wouldn't even really call it, without the requirement for some type of open space, you can't even really call it a cluster subdivision or a conservation subdivision as you might have seen. Vaughn was fond of calling it a conservation subdivision.
so
But I think it is, I think that's true, I think it is a little counterintuitive, you think larger lots, we're gonna preserve agriculture. But if you do well-designed density, then the balance can still be farmed.
I think too, what you're saying is it's more focused toward the rural
Character.
character to keep the agricultural district looking like an agricultural district, where you got 5 acres here and a 40-acre field over here, and I got my chicken houses sitting here. That's another thing you need to take. You start putting these clusters in here in the middle of agriculture, and I got my 4 500-foot chicken houses headed right straight toward you. What are you thinking people gonna say about that cluster?
They shouldn't have built toward them chicken houses. were.
But I'm telling you, they do it all the time, and then they want to shut me down.
Oh, I know that.
So just remember that. I fought this thing for 50 years.
So any other big kind of questions tonight, or y'all want to take this home and chew on it a bit and come back and dig in? Some more questions at the next meeting. We didn't really resolve the lot size, did we?
No.
I think that's gonna need to be chewed on.
Yeah, lot size gonna be chewed on, because we done sent 2 acres to the county commissioners and they said no.
acre and a half.
Acre and a half and they said no. So I mean,
No,
we
they-
said
they
5
didn't-
acres, they gonna say no.
They didn't say anything. They just sort of sent it back. I
Well, no,
guess
they
that
said
was
no.
up the process.
No, they said no.
Oh, yeah, they did, but they're,
They kind of said, we understand what you're going.
In fairness, that was countywide, no districts, no area where you could be more.
Yeah,
yeah.
So
We-
with much less nuance than what we're doing.
right. Because we pulled away from what we originally had planned with the cluster areas to bring that in with the acre and a half, and it was not. So,
Right, I mean, it has districts where we are trying to encourage residential growth. And so we have a much smaller amount, and it has areas where you don't want to encourage that, so. It's a completely different. ordinance.
So yeah, take it home, look at
Chew
it, chew on it, formulate some questions. Come back and guns blazing at the next meeting.
I think I got one question.
Yeah.
This, 5.5.2. Just take a look at that first sentence. Is it, look at reading various, to me.
Yeah, and I actually made a note of that after I printed this off earlier and I was kind of reading it through myself. There's an extra which in there, so
Yeah, I think.
proposed uses for which a building permit is required.
It's got a D on.
It should be required, that's right.
Just didn't read correct.
Yeah.
To me.
So what this first paragraph is pretty much saying is it doesn't apply to any uses there. So you want to okay in the building code.
Well, even beyond that, because they expanded the building, the residential building code now encompasses up to 4 units.
4 units.
Yeah, so this is a fancy way of saying these regulations are going to apply to non-residential developments.
The timing wise, Matthew, what are we looking at here? I know we got much more to do. Is there used to have anything? I think I may have asked this before, but I can't remember what your answer was as far as when you like to see us at a point to where there's some completion.
Yeah, I don't know that we're on any hard deadline, but the way I thought about it is, we've still got this to finish. Then we've got the subdivision ordinance to get back into. The draft of the subdivision ordinance is gonna be coming your way, is gonna be substantially similar to what you guys looked at last year. Paired with this, there's more nuance, right? There's more, detail that I think the commissioners kind of charged us with. One big factor is we're getting into budget season. So I think to keep this on the commissioners around the time that they entertain the budget, probably get me fired. So we probably need to wait until after July 1.
You were saying September earlier, right? September, October to be finished with all of it. I mean,
Yeah, I don't have any firm.
when we first started.
I don't have any firm deadline.
So it's fluid, just kind of working through it as we go.
Exactly. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that?
It's been a long time since they asked us to bring something back. So I would hate to extend it much. There's no point in bringing anything during budget. But I'd like to have something relatively soon thereafter. In
July, August.
Mhm.
This was a request from them. It's not a request we're sending
Yeah,
to them.
we had said, well, let's get this done before budget. Let's bring it in February it's just too much to do.
So whatever that end of the process time is, we would just have a vote on the entire thing that we have discussed here to proceed it forward to the county commissioners. Is that sort of what the process is, Matthew, or?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat
So
that?
we're
Yeah.
bringing this to the commissioners as a staff recommendation.
Okay, so,
How it goes. We would love to have the support of the planning board by vote.
But I think your question is, if we're going through each section,
right,
we're gonna send them.
there's gonna be
We gonna
one
send-
one basic vote, for whatever it means, probably not much, obviously, at the very end of this, that, whether we in favor of it or not in favor of it, and then
Right.
either way, staff's gonna bring it before the county.
We're gonna send it through him.
That's fine. I'll delegate it to Matthew. It'll be great. Yeah, I think it would be great to bring a recommendation that the planning board unanimously recommends.
Well,
That would be great.
So if we want it potentially enacted as an ordinance, then the planning board has to vote and make a recommendation. That then goes to the commissioners for public hearing.
I don't think.
If it's short of that and it's just like, let's talk about this policy proposal. You don't have to make a formal recommendation and it doesn't have to go before them for a public hearing. One thing I think we talked about maybe once or twice is like a workshop kind of a thing.
Yeah, I think we're gonna make a staff recommendation and say, this is what we've worked on with the planning board. This is a good ordinance. If you want to do something, this is the way to do it. And, we'll go from. I wouldn't get too hung up on the particularities after there.
I'm a detailed kind of a guy. I can't help
Just relax.
it. Yeah, okay. So that's all I've got for new business, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Is everybody at peace with what we've talked about tonight? Go home and chew on it and rehash it next month?
Mhm.
What about announcements?
I do. I have a rather somber announcement, unfortunately.
You leaving, are you?
So Ian.
Just you and said somber
This is
announcement.
This is our last meeting with Ian. Tomorrow is gonna be his last day. He's taking a job with a private firm in Roanoke, Virginia, and I'm very excited for him because Roanoke is an awesome city. I think it's gonna be great for his career. And I know that I am definitely gonna miss him in the department as a colleague and as a friend. And he's just been an invaluable asset to the county.
Now he has a reason to go to Roanoke, right?
That's right. That's right.
So come Monday, who's gonna be the senior member tenure wise?
Me, in terms of length in the department, that'd be me.
Year and a half.
Yeah.
Now that didn't have nothing to do
No,
with it.
it's not, you took it wrong. It's just a lot of turnover.
Year and a half, ain't
And no reflection.
Any prospects on him taking his place?
Yeah, I've been, knee deep in the hiring process for, gosh, since January, basically. So I'll have 2 vacancies, once he's gone. Looks like we're gonna bring somebody in on kind of a short-term contract and then have another young man starting, but he won't be available till May. So it's gonna be a little tough here for the next couple of months. Yeah. The only other announcement I had, or just kind of note was, and we mentioned this earlier, is I'll prepare the draft of the subdivision ordinance changes for the next meeting as well. That's all I got.
Okay, well, somebody make that motion.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
You got a motion and a second. See you next month.
Didn't we ask if we were in favor? Just go ahead and
It
shut us
was
down.
inferred.